The silence that speaks louder than words. Have you ever felt that someone looked at you for just a moment too long, as if they wanted to say something but couldn't? Maybe you've noticed a strange hesitation in the way they speak to you, the way they disappear just when you begin to feel close, or the way their eyes seem to carry a story their lips refuse to tell. Most people dismiss these moments as coincidence, but Carl Jung believed that the deepest truths about human relationships rarely exist on the surface. They live in the unconscious, where love, fear, regret, and shame quietly shape our behavior without our awareness. Sometimes the strongest feelings are hidden behind the greatest silence, and the person who seems the most distant may actually be fighting the hardest battle within themselves. Imagine someone who once had the chance to tell you exactly how they felt. Perhaps they believed the timing was wrong. Perhaps pride convinced them to wait one more day. Perhaps fear whispered that rejection would hurt less than vulnerability. Then life moved forward, opportunities disappeared, and what could have become a beautiful connection slowly transformed into a private prison of regret. Jung often explored how the unconscious mind protects us from emotional pain, but those protections come with a hidden cost. The emotions we refuse to express never truly disappear. Instead, they sink beneath awareness, where they continue influencing our thoughts, our dreams, our decisions, and even the way we interact with the very person we cannot forget. This is why someone who deeply loves you may suddenly become strangely quiet. They may avoid your messages, keep conversations short, or pretend they have moved on. Not because their feelings are gone, but because every interaction reminds them of the choice they failed to make. Regret has a unique psychological power. Unlike ordinary sadness, regret constantly forces the mind to replay alternate realities. What if I had spoken sooner? What if I had stayed? What if I had been honest? These questions never receive satisfying answers, so the mind repeats them endlessly, turning memory into an emotional labyrinth with no exit. Jung believed that whatever remains unconscious eventually controls us, and nowhere is this more visible than in love. Yet inside, an entirely different story unfolds. Their unconscious keeps pulling them back toward you through memories, symbols, dreams, familiar songs, random places, and moments they cannot explain. Jung called these meaningful coincidences synchronicities, not proof of destiny, but reminders that the psyche constantly seeks wholeness by bringing unresolved emotions back into awareness. The more they try to bury their feelings, the stronger those feelings demand recognition. This creates an exhausting inner conflict. One part of them longs to reach out, while another insists that it is already too late. One voice whispers, "Tell them the truth," while another replies, "You lost your chance." This silent war can continue for years, shaping their personality without anyone noticing. They become emotionally guarded, not because they stopped loving, but because loving reminds them of everything they regret. And here's the unsettling truth that very few people ever realize. The deepest regrets are rarely about the love we confessed. They are almost always about the love we never had the courage to reveal. But if regret can imprison someone so completely, why do some people choose silence, even when their heart is desperately searching for freedom? The answer lies in one of Jung's most profound psychological discoveries. And once you understand it, you'll never look at hidden love the same way again. The shadow that hides behind regret. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries a hidden side of the personality, known as the shadow, the part of ourselves we reject, suppress, or refuse to acknowledge because it feels too painful, too vulnerable, or too frightening to face. Most people imagine the shadow as something dark or evil, but Jung saw it differently. Sometimes the shadow contains our greatest fears, and sometimes it hides our deepest capacity to love. When someone loves you but remains silent, it is often because their shadow has convinced them that revealing their feelings would expose every weakness they have spent years trying to hide. They may appear confident in public, successful in their career, or emotionally in control, yet beneath that carefully crafted identity lives an invisible voice, repeating the same message: you are not enough. This voice was rarely created overnight. It often begins in childhood, through rejection, criticism, abandonment, or moments when affection seemed conditional rather than unconditional. As these experiences accumulate, the unconscious builds emotional defenses designed to prevent future pain. Unfortunately, those same defenses eventually block genuine intimacy. The tragic irony is that the person who seems emotionally unavailable may actually feel emotions more intensely than anyone around them. They have simply learned that silence feels safer than honesty. Every time they consider telling you how they feel, the unconscious immediately reminds them of every past disappointment, every failed relationship, every moment they trusted someone who walked away. Their mind is no longer responding to the present. It is reacting to old wounds disguised as current reality. Jung warned that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives while we mistake it for fate. This is exactly what happens here. They begin believing that distance is destiny, when in truth it is fear wearing the mask of logic. They tell themselves that you deserve someone better, that you probably don't feel the same, that reaching out would only make things awkward. None of these thoughts are necessarily facts, yet they become emotionally convincing, because they are fueled by unresolved pain instead of objective reality. The unconscious is remarkably skilled at creating believable stories that keep us inside our comfort zones, even when those zones slowly become emotional prisons. This explains why someone can watch your life from afar, quietly celebrate your victories, secretly worry when you seem unhappy, and still never gather the courage to reveal what lies inside their heart. Their silence is not empty, it is overflowing with conversations they have rehearsed 1,000 times but never spoken aloud. Every imagined confession ends with rejection, embarrassment, or loss, so they choose another day of silence instead. Yet silence has its own consequences. The feelings do not disappear. They transform. Love becomes longing, longing becomes regret, and regret slowly reshapes the entire personality. They begin avoiding places where they might unexpectedly meet you because one glance could awaken everything they have tried to bury. They convince themselves they have moved on, only to realize that a familiar perfume, an old photograph, a simple melody, or hearing your name instantly pulls them back into emotions they believed were gone forever. This is the strange power of the unconscious. It remembers what the conscious mind desperately tries to forget. Jung believed that whatever remains unresolved continues seeking expression until it is finally acknowledged. That is why hidden love rarely fades quietly. Instead, it waits patiently beneath the surface, influencing choices, relationships, dreams, and even the future. The heartbreaking truth is that many people do not lose the love of their life because they were unloved. They lose it because fear convinced them that silence was safer than vulnerability. But there is an even deeper psychological force at work, one that explains why, no matter how hard they try to move on, they keep finding themselves emotionally pulled back toward the same person again and again. Understanding this force may completely change the way you see love, regret, and the mysterious patterns that connect two lives long after words have disappeared. Why the unconscious never truly lets go. One of Carl Jung's most fascinating insights was that the unconscious does not measure time the way the conscious mind does. While the world moves forward, days become months, months become years, relationships begin and end. People change cities, careers, and even identities. The unconscious quietly preserves emotionally significant experiences as if they happened yesterday. This is why someone who deeply loved you can appear to have completely moved on while, beneath the surface, one unexpected moment is enough to awaken feelings they believed had disappeared forever. A familiar song, a place you once visited together, the sound of your laughter, or even meeting someone who vaguely resembles you can unlock emotions that were never truly resolved. To the conscious mind, it feels irrational. To Jung, it is simply the psyche demanding completion. The unconscious does not seek comfort. It seeks wholeness. It keeps returning to unfinished emotional stories, because unresolved experiences continue to carry psychological energy, and that energy must go somewhere. If it cannot be expressed through honest conversation, it finds another path. It appears in dreams that make no logical sense, in recurring memories that arrive without invitation, in sudden waves of nostalgia during otherwise ordinary days, and in relationships where a person unknowingly compares everyone else to the one they never fully allowed themselves to love. This is where many people become trapped without realizing it. They believe they are searching for someone new, but in reality they are searching for the feeling they abandoned long ago. Every new connection is unconsciously measured against an old emotional blueprint, making it nearly impossible for anyone else to truly replace what was never emotionally completed. Jung observed that people often project parts of their inner world onto others. When someone falls deeply in love, they are not only seeing the other person, they are also encountering hidden aspects of themselves. The courage they admire, the peace they feel, the sense of belonging they experience, may all reflect qualities their own soul has been longing to integrate. This is why losing that person can feel like losing a piece of one's own identity. The grief is not only about another human being, it is about the version of themselves that existed in that connection. Instead of facing this painful truth, many choose avoidance. They bury themselves in work, distractions, achievements, or new relationships, hoping constant movement will silence what remains unresolved. Yet the unconscious cannot be outrun. It waits patiently beneath every distraction, and the quieter life becomes, the louder those buried emotions begin to speak. They may wake in the middle of the night wondering why your face suddenly appeared in a dream. They may smile at a memory they thought had faded years ago. They may even convince themselves these moments mean nothing, only to realize they keep happening with impossible consistency. The mind is trying to finish a conversation that reality never allowed to happen. This creates a strange contradiction. The more they suppress their feelings, the more emotionally alive those feelings become. What they refuse to express externally grows stronger, internally, until silence itself becomes exhausting. Many people mistake this exhaustion for stress, loneliness, or anxiety without recognizing its true source. Jung believed that symptoms often carry symbolic messages from the unconscious, urging us to confront truths we have avoided. Hidden love is no exception. It quietly asks one question over and over again. What part of yourself are you still afraid to reveal? Until that question is answered, regret continues feeding the silence. And silence continues feeding the regret, creating a cycle that can last for decades. But eventually something unexpected happens, something Jung believed every individual must face sooner or later. The masks begin to crack, the carefully protected identity starts to collapse, and the truth demands to be seen. It is in that unforgettable moment that many people finally discover whether they were protecting their heart or imprisoning it all along. The masks we wear to hide the heart. Carl Jung believed that one of the greatest psychological illusions is the belief that we are the person we present to the world. He called this outward identity the persona, the social mask we wear to gain acceptance, avoid rejection, and protect ourselves from emotional exposure. The persona is not inherently false. It helps us function in society, but when it becomes stronger than our authentic self, it slowly disconnects us from our deepest emotions. This is exactly what happens to someone who loves you but remains silent. They begin performing the role of the person who no longer cares. They smile when they are breaking inside. They speak casually about life while carefully avoiding the one subject that truly matters. They convince friends that everything is fine, even though every quiet moment reminds them of what they never said. Over time, the performance becomes so convincing that even they begin to believe it. Yet the unconscious knows the difference between a mask and the truth. Beneath every forced smile lives an emotion waiting to be acknowledged. Jung observed that whatever we deny within ourselves eventually seeks expression in unexpected ways. A person may become unusually irritated over insignificant things, emotionally distant in new relationships, or strangely nostalgic for moments that seem ordinary to everyone else. They cannot explain why they feel incomplete, because the real source of their pain remains hidden beneath layers of psychological protection. This creates an exhausting inner contradiction. Their conscious mind insists that the past is over, while their unconscious continues acting as though the story has never ended. Every encounter with you becomes emotionally dangerous. Even seeing your name on a screen can trigger memories they spent months trying to suppress. They may type a message, stare at it for several minutes, then delete every word before pressing send. They replay imaginary conversations in which they finally confess everything, only for fear to interrupt at the last second. This cycle repeats so many times that silence becomes a habit rather than a decision. From the outside, it appears as indifference. From the inside, it feels like emotional paralysis. The tragedy is that the persona often receives admiration from the world while the authentic self quietly suffers in isolation. People praise them for being composed, mature, and emotionally strong, never realizing that this strength is sometimes nothing more than carefully disguised fear. Jung warned that living behind the persona for too long comes with a psychological price. The more energy required to maintain the mask, the less energy remains for genuine connection. Relationships begin to feel superficial because the real self never fully appears. Even when someone new enters their life, they struggle to be emotionally present because a part of them is still protecting an old wound that was never allowed to heal. This is why hidden regret has such extraordinary power. It doesn't merely preserve memories, it shapes future relationships. Without realizing it, they compare every conversation, every laugh, every shared moment to the connection they lost through silence. No one seems to measure up, not because others are lacking, but because unresolved emotions distort perception. The past becomes idealized while the present feels strangely empty. Jung believed that true healing begins only when a person has the courage to remove the mask and face the emotions they have spent years avoiding. That moment is terrifying because it demands vulnerability instead of control. It asks them to risk rejection instead of living with certainty. Many never reach that point. They grow older, carrying the weight of words that were never spoken, discovering far too late that temporary embarrassment would have been easier to bear than a lifetime of wondering, what if? But for those who finally choose authenticity over fear, something remarkable begins to happen. They stop fighting the unconscious and start listening to it. And according to Jung, that is where the real transformation begins. A transformation that reveals why some people unexpectedly return after years of silence, as though an invisible force has been guiding them back all along. Why they keep coming back to you. There is a question that has puzzled people for generations. Why does someone disappear, remain silent for months or even years, and then suddenly reappear as if an invisible thread has been pulling them back the entire time? Carl Jung believed that the answer is far deeper than simple nostalgia. Human beings are not only driven by logic, they are guided by unconscious patterns that continue operating long after the conscious mind believes a chapter has closed. When a powerful emotional experience remains unresolved, the psyche refuses to treat it as finished. Instead, it quietly circles back, again and again, searching for the closure it never received. This is why a person who once loved you deeply may find themselves thinking about you during completely ordinary moments. They could be walking through a familiar street, hearing a stranger laugh in a way that reminds them of you, opening an old notebook, or catching the scent of a perfume they have not smelled in years. In an instant, the emotional walls they spent so much effort building begin to crack. They tell themselves it is only a memory, only a passing thought. Yet the thought keeps returning with surprising persistence. Jung would argue that this is not the past refusing to die, it is the unconscious insisting on being heard. Every unresolved emotion carries psychological energy, and until that energy is acknowledged, it continues influencing perception, decisions, and relationships. This often explains why someone who appears happy on the outside still feels an unexplainable emptiness inside. They may achieve success, build a career, travel the world, or even enter another relationship. But a quiet part of them continues asking the same unanswered question. What would my life have become if I had simply told the truth? Regret is unlike other emotions because it constantly imagines an alternative reality. The mind does not replay what happened. It replays what could have happened. It creates conversations that never occurred, embraces that never happened, futures that were never lived. These imagined realities become so emotionally vivid that they begin competing with the present itself. Over time, the person is no longer comparing reality to reality. They are comparing reality to an idealized possibility that exists only within the unconscious. This is why they may unexpectedly reach out after years of silence. To everyone else, the message seems spontaneous. To them, it is the result of countless internal battles fought in complete solitude. Before sending a single word, they may have rewritten it dozens of times, stared at the screen for hours, closed the app, reopened it the next day, and questioned whether they had any right to speak after waiting so long. Their silence was never empty. It was filled with fear, shame, hope, and endless hesitation. Jung believed that true psychological growth requires confronting the truths we spend the most energy avoiding. Eventually, the unconscious becomes stronger than the defenses protecting it. The mask begins to feel unbearable, and authenticity becomes less frightening than continued regret. This moment can feel almost mysterious, as though life itself is creating opportunities for unfinished stories to return. Two people cross paths unexpectedly, receive the urge to reconnect on the same day, or experience dreams so emotionally powerful that they can no longer ignore what they feel. Whether these moments are coincidence or simply the mind recognizing meaningful patterns, Jung believed they reveal something important about the human search for wholeness. Yet there is a crucial misunderstanding many people make. They assume that returning automatically means healing. It does not. Coming back is only the beginning. The real challenge is whether both people have changed enough to meet each other honestly instead of repeating the same unconscious patterns that created the silence in the first place. Without self-awareness, the past simply recreates itself under a different name. But when fear is finally replaced by honesty, something extraordinary becomes possible. The love that once lived only in imagination has a chance to become reality. And this leads to Jung's most profound lesson of all, not about love itself, but about the transformation that occurs when a person finally stops running from the deepest truth hidden within their own soul. The truth regret tries to hide. In the end, Carl Jung's message was never simply about love, relationships, or the people who enter and leave our lives. It was about the courage required to become whole. The person who loves you deeply but remains silent is not only struggling with feelings for another human being, they are confronting themselves. Every regret, every hesitation, every unsent message points toward a deeper psychological reality, the battle between fear and authenticity. Jung believed that the greatest tragedy is not rejection, failure, or even heartbreak. The greatest tragedy is living a life disconnected from the truth of who you are. When someone hides their feelings for years, they often believe they are protecting themselves from pain. Yet what they are actually protecting is a version of themselves built on fear. They avoid one moment of vulnerability only to carry years of unanswered questions. They choose temporary safety and unknowingly exchange it for lasting uncertainty. As time passes, they begin to understand something that the unconscious has been trying to teach them all along. The pain was never created by love itself. The pain came from resisting it, suppressing it, and refusing to acknowledge what was real. This realization can be life-changing. Suddenly, they stop viewing regret as punishment and start seeing it as a teacher. Every missed opportunity, every moment of silence, every chance they failed to take reveals a truth about the life they truly wanted. Jung often emphasized that awareness is transformative. The moment something unconscious becomes conscious, it loses much of its power over us. This is why the most important question is not whether someone secretly loves you. The more important question is whether they will ever become conscious enough to face that truth. Some people do. They reach a point where the burden of silence becomes heavier than the fear of honesty. They finally speak, not because they are certain of the outcome, but because they are tired of living in conflict with themselves. Others never take that step. They continue carrying hidden feelings through the years, convincing themselves that circumstances, timing, or fate are responsible, while the real obstacle remains the same fear that stopped them from speaking in the beginning. And this is where Jung's deepest lesson emerges. Life is not asking us to avoid pain. Life is asking us to grow through it. Every meaningful relationship acts like a mirror, reflecting parts of ourselves we might otherwise never see. The people we love often reveal our greatest hopes, our deepest wounds, and the aspects of our personality that are still waiting to be integrated. Sometimes a person enters your life to stay. Sometimes they enter your life to teach you something about yourself. And sometimes they become both. If someone loves you deeply yet remains silent, their silence tells a story far more complex than indifference. It speaks of inner battles, unresolved fears, hidden dreams, and the universal human struggle between the safety of hiding and the freedom of being known. Whether they ever speak those feelings aloud is a choice only they can make. But one truth remains undeniable. Feelings buried by fear do not disappear. They linger in memories, echo through dreams, shape decisions, and quietly influence the course of a life. Because the heart can be ignored, distracted, and silenced, but it cannot be permanently deceived. Eventually, every person must face the truths they spent years avoiding. And when that moment arrives, they often discover that the thing they feared most was never rejection at all. It was realizing how much of their life had been spent standing outside the door of their own happiness. So if there is one lesson to remember from Jung's psychology, it is this: the greatest risk is not expressing what you feel. The greatest risk is allowing fear to decide your future. For in the end, the wounds we heal become wisdom, the truths we face become freedom, and the love we have the courage to acknowledge becomes part of the person we were, always meant to be. The question is not whether someone loves you in silence. The question is whether they will ever find the courage to let that silence end.